Is the 11th of the 11th, 2025. The time is 5 minutes past 8, and that means, as always, one thing, that there are a multitude of F1 centric threads at which we need to pull. Remken, Michael, TMM, Ghost. We'll talk about Ferrari and all their shenanigans. Lewis Hamilton clapping back as well as his former teammate, the one that they call Jenson Button. Mark Hughes has written an article. So too has Pablo Elizalde on motorsport.com, and it gets techier than techie things. We'll talk about Maximilian Verstappen, potentially whether he could have won yesterday. There's a lot of hypotheticals. Keep him out, extend one of the stints, do 2 stints on mediums as opposed to 2 on mediums and 1 on softs. Lest we forget that Lando Norris's tyres on that last stint were not fresh either. So too, we'll talk about the Red Bull Talking Bull interview of Lauren Mekies. In there, he had some things to say about Max Verstappen, which I think are noteworthy. So too, we'll talk about Toto, the boy who cried wolf, set to sell off a stake which will value Mercedes AMG F1 at $6 billion US dollars. Did I stutter? What are we doing here? This is testament to the fact that a rising Netflix Drive to Survive tide has indeed floated all F1 boats. F1 is at peak if we're talking under the aegis of financial resources and monetization. Let's talk about some of this Max Verstappen stuff in the first instant, because there's been a lot of speculation over whether this chap could have won and kept his driver championship hopes alive if he'd have extended the stint. Now, I don't know. This is speculation. It's always going to be F1 Barbershop Talk. But when we were streaming yesterday, I remember thinking, if you are gangsters, Red Bull, then just leave him out. You know what I mean? You've played the Joker each and every single juncture hitherto. Why not leave him out? What do you have to lose? The stop loss here is super tight. The risk, therefore, asymmetric. There is only upside. If you're talking about grabbing P2, you would argue that if had Max stayed out, then surely his probability of securing that second place would have been greater than doing what they did, pitting him again and having him end up on those red labelled soft compound tyres. Andrew Benson put forth another supposition, another hypothetical, and it sounded something like this. Why not just stretch out the medium stint, sack off the extra pit stop? You didn't need that. That cost you an extra 21 seconds. Just extend the stint on mediums, pit shortly thereafter for another set of the premium tyre over the course of the race weekend, which is of course another yellow labelled medium compounded tyre. Now, Andrew Benson said on the Checkered Flag podcast, that so many insiders in the paddock, team principals et al. And engineers thought that by their stipulations and calculations, had Max Verstappen extended, been an ever so slightly more conservative on that medium tyre and then pitted for another set of mediums, that they had him by their calculations as winning that Grand Prix. So what are Red Bull doing? Christian Horner Red Bull would have never hesitated to roll that dice, to play a joke. And I think this is the gift and the curse of being in the post-Christian Horner era, that Lauren Mekies will come with more stability. He's infinitely more stoic than Christian Horner. No longer is it Christian Horner Red Bull Racing. This is Oracle Red Bull Racing, and Mintslaff and Matashitz and Charlie Mivija even have to be pleased with that. But sometimes in the heat of battle, you need yourself a Caesar at the gate. A bod who's going to make decisions, who's going to roll the dice each and every single time. And I would argue that this was a case in point, not around what Red Bull have gained in Lauren Mekies' stewardship, but what they've lost in Christian Horner's. Mark Hughes debates in this article that he absolutely could have won, because the differential between Lando Norris's tyres, that the final stint on which he did, was only a couple laps. That Lando's tyres were scrubs at the end. Therefore, there would have only been 6 or 7 laps delta as far as the age between Max's and Lando's. Listen, I'm telling you, it's techier than techie things. Let me show you this as well, guys. Because again, if we're talking driver championship, look at this. Rounds 1 to 7 shows you that Piastri gone clear away, 146 points accrued, as versus his teammate Lando Norris, 133. Max Verstappen right up there with the McLaren pairing on 124. Rounds 15 to 21, far right hand column of your screen, Maximilian Verstappen at 154 points in the drivers accrued, Norris 115, Russell 104, Oscar Piastri has dropped off. We can have the conversation about what's driving Oscar Piastri. Some theorise that potentially it's inexperience. Some are saying that it's low grip tracks, and the fact that he's very binary as far as his throttle and brake inputs. Some are speculating, per Andrew Benson of the Checkered Flag podcast, lest we forget that all F1 journos are created equal, but some are created more equal than others. Benson says that there's no way that you can argue at this juncture with a straight face that the pressure isn't getting to Oscar Piastri. Such is the extent of his underperformance. However, what I want to draw your guys' attention to is that middle column. Rounds 8 to 14, Lando Norris 142, Oscar Piastri accrues 138 points, Maximilian Verstappen 63, chat. That's the losing of the championship, if indeed you are a Maximilian Verstappen fan of his peculiar brand of sporting endeavour par excellence. That's where it went away, because the car wouldn't fudge in turn. The aerodynamic efficiency, so characterised by the RB19, was now a thing of the past, erstwhile, yesteryear. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the championship was lost. Oh, and by the way, Red Bull are already publishing launch dates for next year. So focused are they on that? This feels a bit pathetic, fallacy-esque, that on the back of the Brazilian Grand Prix, which to all intents potentially could see the end of Max Verstappen's championship challenge in 2.5. On the day afterwards, not 24 hours post, Red Bull are talking about 2026 Ford powertrain collaboration. I'm telling you, it's going to get techie. January the 15th, 2026, and I'm waiting for it. You need to, Lauren Mekies and Rico Balbo, the one that they call Pierre Vacher, build yourself a rocket ship. The stakes are higher than ever now. Do not think for a second that Max Verstappen, notwithstanding his loyalty to the team that birthed his Formula One career, will leave them. Course, why? Because again, at this juncture for Max, it's important decisions. This is sliding doors, right? Make the wrong move now and you're doomed. Valerian doom, even, as far as 4 championships. You will sit alongside the likes of Lauda, the likes of Prost, all of them, but you will never ever see the 5-time champion as far as the records are concerned. An F1 barbership debate is that is Juan Manuel Fangio, let alone the 7-time champions of Michael Schumacher and Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. The next decision, Max's next move, is an important one, therefore. And they're talking about the car might be good. It would be risky. Lauren Mekies was on a podcast recently, the Talking Bull podcast. Shout out to my guy Tomo, saying that this is going to be one of the most extraordinary things in F1 history. Of course, he speaks of the collaboration between Red Bull and Ford. I would argue this, Lauren Mekies, you had it right the first time, chap, when you said it would be disingenuous to expect Red Bull powertrains in collaboration with Ford to exist in the same stratosphere of competition as the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari. Why? Well, because they have vastly more experience. They have more skin in the game, do Ferrari and Mercedes. Lest we forget, the rumour and speculation, word on the F1 curb is in Middle England. Remember, F1's super incestuous. They talk all the time. Word on the F1 curb is that Mercedes, as far as their power units, that they have the advantage going into a brand new rule and reg spec that is 2026. Lest we forget, 50% ICE, 50% electric. Shortly thereafter, Scuderia Ferrari are set to get their ish together. Oh, and by the way, speaking about Scuderia Ferrari, the red car with the yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop, with a view not to bury the lead. Chaos over there at Maranello, as you would expect, as per usual. Normal service resumes. Here's what's happened over the last 24 hours. In fact, let's go back and set the scene, because context here is key. They bought into Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton PLC to the tune of $70 million US. Mileage, though, may vary. They didn't buy into him just for the marketing opportunity, not just because their strategic objective was not to no longer be a car brand only, but to become a luxury brand. And who better to help them do that than the one that they call Sir Lewis, 7-time champion, GOAT settings, Mount Rushmore of F1. And so they bought into it. They sacrificed at the altar of Adrian Newey, the last airbender. They destroyed that project. That was never going to happen. They would never have financial resources sufficient to sign both of them. Anyway, they decided in their stubbornness that they were happy with their infrastructure, engineer and aerodynamic lot, that they didn't need Adrian Newey coming in, barking orders, talking about this equity that he feels that he deserves. Frederick Vasseur then said, no, we don't need ourselves Adrian Newey. What we need is a driver in Sir Lewis Hamilton. Well, how's that worked out, Frederick Vasseur? Not very well. 64 points is the delta between a resurgent Charles Leclerc, no longer making so many mistakes, errors of the unforced variety, and one Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson Hamilton. 64 points. 3 times this year, Lewis Hamilton has crossed the finishing line ahead of his 28-year-old teammate, the one that they call modern day Jean Alesi. And I don't think if you're getting paid $70 million by any account, not least the C-suite execs over at Fiorano and Maranello, that would be deemed good enough. Of late, Lewis has been more vocal, more pointed in his criticism, more frequent in it also. And that, some say, has rubbed engineers, particularly the more experienced ones at the red team with the yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop, rubbed them up the wrong way, as you would expect, lest we forget the working culture over there is prohibitive. That's why you hear on the communication radio between the engineer and the driver every single time, oh, plan A, plan B, plan C. Oh, we are checking. They will say they are scared over there to make mistakes for fear of peeving off the hierarchy, the powers that be. And that's no way to work if you want to facilitate and breed innovation. Doesn't work like that. That's why Lewis is typing out these memos and saying to them, what's going on here? This makes no sense. I know what good looks like as far as working culture. And this here at Fiorano and Maranello, these engineers and aerodynamicists and pit crew with the red overalls and a yellow badge and the black prancing course atop, it is not it. It looks nothing like it. You heard Sir Lewis firsthand say that I've won a gazillion Grand Prix at Canada. I watched the engineers setting up the car for Canada, and that's not it. That is not what good looks like. And if anybody's going to know what good looks like, it is Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. Over the past weekend, Brazilian Grand Prix, yet another disappointing weekend. This is ineptitude central. Never have you seen the likes of, unless it is Ferrari, in previous years. But it just gets worse and worse as far as 2025. Lest we forget, for context, they ended last year with the quickest set of wheels, only a couple of points, 14 if I recall correctly, away from winning the championship of the Constructors' Variety. And they decided that they were going to change all of the components, all of the parts. And here we are. They are nowhere. A diva of a car reminiscent of Mercedes W13 Zero Pod concept. Works only one of 365 days a year in high altitude conditions when there's a full moon. That's what we're dealing with here as far as the SF25 lift and coast, as near as makes no difference every single turn. And the hierarchy being Ferrari's hierarchy, expect Charles and Lewis to sit there and just tolerate it. Any words, any criticism, again, it feels like they're speaking out against the team. And here's where John Elkann comes in. Where it gets techier than techie things as far as Elkann's concerned, because he had some things to say. I was going to bring up the clip, but yeah, I will copy and paste it in the description. This is important, chap. John Elkann came out and he had this to say. We definitely have drivers who need to focus on driving and talk less, because we still have important races ahead of us this season in F1, and getting second place is not impossible. Chaos. Talk less. To whom are you speaking, John Elkann? $70 million a year, Sir Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion. Charles Leclerc, the man who's given as near as makes no difference his whole career to a failing operation in Scuderia Ferrari. How very dare you, John Elkann. The irony isn't lost in the F1 community. For even Jenson Button is commenting underneath the Sky Sports F1 post saying, well, maybe you want to take a leaf from your own book, John, if you want them to talk less and you are invested in unity, because it's true. The irony is not lost on me that John Elkann, in making this statement, is only being divisive. There is no unity of which we can speak. This article, Pablo Elizalde, a Motorsport magazine, says it is chaos over there at Ferrari, but this is nothing new for the avoidance of doubt as far as the red team are concerned. Elizalde says that from Enzo Ferrari himself to Luca Montezemolo, the Scuderia Ferrari leaders have always chosen the public stage to issue private reprimands. Now, I don't want to typecast here nor stereotype, but this is why people say that an Italian outfit will always be too emotional to streamline themselves for success. 2000 to 2004, when they had it, when they couldn't lose, for Michael Schumacher was in his prime, in his dominance, as near as makes no difference, invincible. Then it was Sean Todd's era, it was Rory Byrne, it was Ross Brawn too. They were the Holy Trinity, right? And they were the ones upon whose shoulders success at Scuderia Ferrari was born. Open, non-rhetorical question then. The Scuderia Ferrari, owing to their culture and passion, does that lead to lower or reduced lap time speed? Is there deficiency and not advantage in that? Surely then you need to get in another Ross Brawn type, another Adrian Newey type, but again they passed up the opportunity. And let me ask you guys this question as well. I've seen good leaders and bad leaders. For me personally, to get the best out of me, you don't come out and criticize me in public. If there's let's have our arguments behind closed doors, just like Sir Alex Ferguson used to say. But I will back my drivers, the people that I work with, that work for me. I'm going to back them in public every single time, because it's us and them mentality, us against the world, surely. Never ever would I come out before the world's press and media and say that we've got drivers, mention no names, Lewis and Charles, that need to talk less. I'd argue, chap, that they need to talk more, that they need to be more constructive in their criticism, more assertive. You have in Sir Lewis Hamilton a chap who knows what good looks like. You tell me another driver on the grid that's won more championships than him, and I'll wait. None. There's your answer. Leverage him, therefore. Lean on him for counsel. If he tells you this isn't what good looks like, that this is different, that there is a material differential between what you're doing and what Mercedes were doing in their heyday, then listen and take heed and action that. Talk less. What are you saying, John Elkann? The irony is not lost on me. This Motorsport magazine article continues that in doing so, in being so overtly and explicitly critical before the world's press and media, sometimes Ferrari's leaders have reminded the world, whilst they reminded the world who's in charge, just as often they've reminded everybody exactly why. And here's where it gets techie, chat. In doing this, John Elkann reminds the world exactly why Ferrari can never quite escape its own turmoil during rough periods like the current one. This is a doom loop. This is an expectation pressure doom loop, that the more that they do badly, the more that Elkann et al. Are likely to come out and talk about it and criticise the drivers. What happens shortly thereafter? You think Lewis and Charles are going to hear that and feel impassioned to do better? If that were me, I would down tools. I'd be like, yeah, all right then, John. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to collect my 70 million. Now, of course, I'm not a champion, but I would contend, knowing Lewis Hamilton for who he is, the sensitive soul, I don't think that's going to empower him nor motivate him as John Elkann thinks it is. And Charles Leclerc, the same goes for him too. This article continues, and I quote, "For a chairman expecting order and unity, his driver's discontent may sound dangerously close to dissent, particularly when that discontent is publicly expressed throughout an entire season." How often do you expect Sir Lewis and Charles Leclerc to say the same thing behind closed doors? And I understand Same goes for them, right? When they're interviewed in the scrum and they're being asked what happened, of course you don't want them to say that the car is SH1T, that we don't work in a way that's harmonious nor agile, that what I'm seeing per Sir Lewis is not market leading, nor is it purple sector worthy. You don't want them to come out in front of the public and say that. But what else are they to do at this point? They're asked these questions every single race. And when things aren't improving, notwithstanding your promises and Frederick Vasseur's promises, what else are they to do? So article continues, telling the drivers to talk less risks not only missing the point, but creating more turmoil, upsetting the team's leadership and the drivers themselves. This is the point. While Hamilton's season has been far from what he expected from a personal point of view, Charles Leclerc at least has earned the right, and here's where it gets techie, chat. Here we're going in now. This chap at Motorsport magazine has dropped a bombshell, Elizalde. He says Charles Leclerc has earned the right by dint of his 8 years at Scuderia Ferrari to complain about missed opportunities and to air his frustrations. Doing it publicly, yeah, that might not be the best option, but both Charles and Sir Lewis are vocal, not out of arrogance, but because they are desperate for progress. Where is it, Scuderia Ferrari? Nowhere to be seen. So the article continues on Charles Leclerc, that he's been the face of Ferrari's modern day era, fast and loyal both. Now in his 7th season with Scuderia Ferrari, Charles Leclerc has been through 4 technical restructurings and 2 team principals. His comments are not misplaced, they are correct. They reflect years of frustration that no amount of silence could or would have fixed. There's an important point here that he makes about Charles Leclerc. He's their prodigal son. Whatever anybody wants to say about Sir Lewis and the dream and the symbiosis of Brand Hamilton and Scuderia Ferrari, whatever anybody wants to say about that, Charles Leclerc is their guy. He's done nothing but drive the car gangbusters for the past however many seasons. Yeah, he makes mistakes. I get it. But he wants to win not just a championship, but he wants to win a championship with Ferrari. That's why he's had patience, God tier levels of it up until this point. And for them to disrespect him and group him in that and say that we need drivers in plural that talk less, as if Charles Leclerc is moaning for nothing. What are we doing here, chat? You cannot even write it. And to that, Lewis Hamilton has come out and clapped back, as you would expect it, without subtlety, with impunity. Here's what Lewis Hamilton said on Insta. I back my team. I back myself. I will not give up. Not now, not then, not ever. Thank you, Brazil, always. It's techie. And it's failed. But of course he's responding to John Elkann. What are you talking about, mate? Stop talking. Of course I'm going to talk. People have been telling me to. Lewis Hamilton would be thinking this, by the way. People have been telling me to stop talking all my life. You're paying me $70 million US. I'm 41 years old. You think I'm going to start listening to that now? Better behave yourself. Lewis has been fighting all these years to make sure nobody can institute any imperatives pointed at him. Tell him ipso facto what to do. You're talking about talk less. How about you go and build it? Here's what this boils down to. Scuderia Ferrari Jan Elkann, who has the temerity to talk about how good the engineers are and celebrate the WEC at Bahrain. Here's what it boils down to, mate. Lewis and Charles are not building the car. That's not their subject matter expertise. Yeah, they'll buy into it. They'll contribute, counsel them on it and its direction as far as a design philosophy. But those who are putting together the blueprints and the drawings, who are dreaming up the God tier ideas, the double diffuser ones, the last airbender type things, the X-Wing, those guys are the engineers, John Elkann, and those are the ones that you are praising. And so I'm calling out this fella for agency. Sir, what you don't like is being criticised in public. And I would argue that in being invested in that, this Shakespearean level of false seeming will take your eye off of the durable advantage ball. And that's not good enough. Just as it did with Luca Montezemolo before Arriva Bene, so too Bonotto. And you don't want that. Nobody wants that, because of course a rising Ferrari tide floats all boats. Techie, very, very techie. Go on then. What's Nandi saying? Championship mindset is something that they don't have. Free climb at all. Matt said it on our podcast. In another 5 to 10 years, the whole grid is going to be full of max level drivers. These young guys got accurate sims. Now, I think most of them, Rob, so you're talking about the paradigm shift that is sim culture. I think he said on the Pelas Pistas podcast that most of the guys already have their sims right now. There's a few that aren't in them as often as you might expect, but nevertheless, like I think it's happening. I always have this argument with Shez. It's like, nah, the sim's not real. It's like the sim has never been real. I'll never forget the time when I went to go and I wanted to learn how to manipulate an oversteery car, a cheeky Mazda MX-5 1.6, and my tutor there looked about 10 years old. I said, I'm not getting in the car with you, mate. You need to show me that you can slide. If you're the drift king, then you can teach me. If you are not, then go and get somebody who is. This 10-year-old jumped in the car. I exaggerate with 10. He must have been about 14 years old. Jumped in the car, no license of which he can speak. Never has driven a car on UK roads, and drove this 1.6 Mazda NB Miata MX-5. Drove it like he was Suchiya from Best Motoring. I said to this chap, how? Explain? Care? Oh, this makes no sense. How are you this good in this car, driving it and drifting it around cones in figure 8, and you've never driven a car on UK roads? He looked at me and he said, I've done 100,000 miles in my sim at home on the PlayStation. Thrustmaster settings. That's not even a good sim. And if he can drift that well off the back of that, imagine these kids in Max and Lando and next generation coming up shortly thereafter who are on Fanatec and Double D settings. Imagine them who have got the proper, all of the kit, all of the fit. I'm telling you, the next generation are going to be banned. And to be fair to Max, he said already that his plan, by dint of his esports team, is to usher in, to bring in a sim driver, an original sim driver, as far as their Genesis story, into F1 proper. That's what he said his dream is. It will happen. I have no doubt about it. Sims have never been realer. Oh, and by the way, we need to talk about Toto, the boy who cried wolf. It's chaos. Darius, TWM, chaos. This dude, I can't even put words to it. I'll never believe it. Right, Toto. It's getting techie over there for Toto. In fact, before we get to Toto, let me tell you about the Talking Bull podcast, on which Lauren Mekies said some things. I'm going to point them out in summary. Worth watching. I will link the video in the description. And shout out to my guy Tomo out here doing purple sectors. Tomo and his co-host sat down with Lauren Mekies and was asking him a couple different questions. In the first instance, these are the gems. Lauren Mekies said, Max is even more, as stupid as this sounds, Lauren Mekies said, Max has proved even more extraordinary outside of the car than he is inside the car. Care? What is he even talking about? That's impossible for me to even conceive. Mekies continues. He says that the engineers refer to Max as the sharpest, the most feedbacky sensor that they have in the car. That's interesting. I like the way they do that. And you will have seen by now the bloody onboards of Maximilian Verstappen, to testament to Lauren Mekies' thesis. You'd have seen by now the onboards of Maximilian Verstappen nearly spinning, as did Hulkenberg and Oscar Piastri in front of him, but correcting it. I'll bring it up tomorrow and we'll watch it because it's chaotic fan footage. Wait, I talk all this stuff about seeing Max and you guys say, D1 level Max Glaze, etc. But when you see Max correct something like that, granted on the soft compound tyres where all around him are failing, it is the point manifest that Max is operating with more colours, with different palettes, with oils and water paints. The length and breadth of his safety net is broader in dimension than most of the rest on the grid, and that's why he can drive the car like that. It's his ability to manipulate the car in and around on the limits of adhesion in a way that I think we've rarely seen before in F1 history. And when you watch this video, you'll see it in real time, all and sundry going around turn 3 at Brazil. peeling off, yeeting it into the barrier. Max has the cheeky oversteer instance and snaps it back in and carries on, just like he did at Mexico when he was WRCing it on the grass. Ipso facto, I say all of that to say this: not a bad peddler, that Max guy, Zach Brown. Laurie Mekies talks as well. He talks that Max is always in the sim, that post the race he'll phone Max just to check in on him, and Max will be like, yeah, no, I am racing again, whether it's on the sim or at the Nordschleife. For the avoidance of doubt, a rising Max Verstappen tide floats all boats. Do the drivers have an internal cross-discipline training program? I think most of them have their own physios, their own specialist ones. I'm really looking forward to seeing Kimi's trajectory. He's not looked bad, Easy G. He's put some respect on his name. I tell you this much: it felt a lot like 2021 and Cota. Then it was Max Verstappen on the defense to a fire-breathing dragon in Sir Lewis Hamilton on fresher tyres. I thought that there was no way that a 23-year-old Dutchman was going to be able to hold off a fire-breathing dragon in Lewis in his prime. No, I've never seen it. This is unprecedented circumstance. I can barely conceive of it, let alone imagining it happening proper. And then Max went and held him off in 2021 at Cota, and it was similar. I understand that Max's tyres are waning, so hard was he pushing them. But yeah, and still, for the whole performance over the course of the race weekend, put some respect on Kimi Antonelli's name. Maybe now he's starting to deliver on his not insubstantial potential. Maybe now Toto, the boy who cried wolf, isn't looking like an idiot. Maybe now Kimi Antonelli is putting forth his best foot, and therefore his principal supposition that if you're going to switch out one of those drivers, then maybe you need to do King George Russell for Max Verstappen. We'll continue this conversation in 12 months' time. And the Italian sporting correlates with each other. Oh, without a doubt, I'm a passionate sim racer. See this free climb? It's what got me into racing. I think this is kind of like Drive to Survive free climb if we're talking about sim racing. The brand new shop window into F1 and racing, respectively. That's what we're seeing. And again, it's 2025 and things are different. Is this a rant? It is always a rant, Buddha, laced with some me talking extemporaneously. It's not a rant. It could be about Ferrari because I'm getting a bit cheesed off with them at the moment. Now you're going to talk about driving over Chris Fackett's Remcon. It's a good analogy that I've stolen from somewhere. So such is Max Verstappen's feedback that if he were to drive over a Chris Packet, some say he'd be able to tell you what make and what flavour. Some have said 21 regs were disadvantageous to Mercedes. Ride height got increased. Barge boards, they got rid of them, didn't they? TWM. It was always about Toto and not Kimi. So go on then, since we're talking about Toto, word on the F1 curb is that Toto's about to sell a material stake in Mercedes F1 AMG. Techie, Sport Co. I want to say release the news in the first instance, but I am taking from ft.com since I trust them, lest we forget all F1 publications are created equal, but some are created more equal than others. The FT says that Mercedes F1 chief Toto, the boy who cried wolf, quote, is going to sell a stake at 6 billion valuation. Not a 6 billion stake, but a stake that priced up, values the company, the F1 team at 6 billion. What are we doing here, chat? That is chaos, absolute scenes. Lest we forget that it was only a couple of years ago when Toto was buying for hundreds of millions. I mean, or can you spell order of magnitude? Capital appreciation, any? Again, for the avoidance of doubt, a rising Netflix Drive to Survive tide floats or F1 boats. This article reads as follows. Team principal and co-owner is in advanced talks over a deal that could set a record valuation for an F1 team. Lest we forget, McLaren have just been valued at anywhere between 4 and 5 billion, haven't they? Of course, Mercedes' financial footprint will be broader and deeper than theirs. Article continues. Mercedes F1 chief Toto is in advanced talks to sell part of his stake at a $6 billion valuation in a deal that will mark a record for an F1 team and underscore the sport's commercial success under US ownership. Should we talk about this very quickly? Because I came out and I didn't like the way that Liam Parker said that if Stefano Domenicali, Liam Parker, of course, is the Chief Communications Officer of Liberty Media, Formula One, and he said that if his boss were here, he would speak about Formula One this way, that it is not a sport in 2025, it is content. As blasphemous as that sounds, he's now getting me on board. I think, though, that they need to move accordingly. You guys have seen the God tier work that ye listener was doing on YouTube that you couldn't get anywhere else on F1 TV or through official channels. And so why, if you are a content creator, if that's what you see, how you see F1, then why not do like NBA do and MLB and any other sport that understands what time it is in 2025 and embrace the God tier content creators who are doing your heavy lifting for you and therefore promoting the sport. However, this valuation is proof positive that Liam Parker, Chief Communications Officer of Formula One, is barking at the right tree. Netflix Drive to Survive has done something different in conjunction, of course, with the Gangbusters season that was 2021, Max and Lewis, and COVID. The fact that F1 did a sterling job of being one of the only, if not the only, international F1 sports, international sports franchises to still put on live events. But again, I say all that to say that a rising Netflix Drive to Survive tide has indeed now proof positive floated all F1 boats. 6 billion. What are we doing here? The deal and the discussion would involve Toto bringing an outside investor into an outside investor. Do you know anybody who's looking? Chat. Who is there that's? I'm sure that there's a chap who springs to mind. I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name, but there is a chap who's seeking some equity in a team. He's trying to leverage British and Middle Eastern and United States native financiers with a view to acquire some. Did he work at Red Bull or something? I can't remember his name. The deal and the discussion would involve Wolff bringing an outside investor into the holding company that owns 33% stake in the Mercedes F1 team, according to a person with knowledge of the matter. So what does this mean then? It means that Toto's not going away, that he's still going to operate as the CEO, team principal, and big will have still a big shareholding in Formula One, in Mercedes F1, excuse me. So article continues, it will result in an outside investor taking a stake of about 5% in the team. The person said Wolff will remain as chief executive and team principal. Remember as well, this dude, I can't remember his name, this team principal that used to work at Red Bull Racing. Used to have a lot of banter with Toto going back and forth. Accused Toto of inheriting his team in 2010 post Ross Brawn, to which Toto would always respond, I didn't inherit my team, I bought it. Christian Horner, there he is, that's the guy's name who wants the equity, Christian Horner. The governance continues, this article, of the team will remain unchanged, and all three partners, Mercedes, Toto and Ineos, are fully committed to the ongoing success of Mercedes in Formula One. Wolff, German car maker Mercedes-Benz, and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, petrochemicals company Ineos, each own a third in the team. Techie. Mercedes Grand Prix, the company that operates the F1 team, reported revenues of 636 million Great British pounds in 24, up from 546 million the previous year. Pre-tax profits rose to 163 million from 115 million in the same time frame. The company proposed the final dividend for the year of 125 million. What are we doing here, chat? These numbers are nonsense. I can't even compute them. And again, I spoke to Sabaxty about this earlier, and Sabaxty seems to think that this is portending Toto stepping away. Now, I agree. I feel like there were conversations, and nobody can tell me any different, that there were conversations between Toto and Lewis about sacking it all off after 2021. Ultimately, the two of them decided to come back, and I think that's why Toto was so upset, gut punched by Lewis leaving and going across to Scuderia Ferrari. I think Toto still has a wish to win some more championships post what happened in 2021. Michael Massey settings, and I don't think he'll be looking to leave. But yeah, and still at some point he's got to take his hands off of the Mercedes AMG F1 reins. Has he not? Potentially Christian Horner, chat. Can you even imagine this? Indulge me for a second. As unrealistic and implausible as this sounds, Christian Horner sat at a C-suite exec level Mercedes F1 meeting alongside Ineos, Sir Jim Radcliffe and Toto the boy who cried wolf. Can you imagine doing their best to circle the wagons around a Mercedes driver pairing that involves one Max Verstappen? Oh, the humanity. You can't even write it. Impossible. No, pant wetting cinema is what that would be. I'm not sure. I think we're reaching. I think there's too much water underneath the bridge. I think they're too beefy. Again, they enjoy the antagonism. But I just can't see Christian and Toto sat at the saying, if it did happen, though, Macon, free climb, they'd make a formidable pairing, wouldn't they? You'd want to go to bat on their team with them. It'd be chaos, but I just can't see it happening. I think it's no. I indulge me in my. I think it's a bit reachy. I think it'd be too beefy, too rancor, too full of antagonism. 10 times multiple, yeah, mate. Imagine TWL, a massive order of magnitude. Toto needs to be like Zach. In what sense, Rob? You know what's hilarious? Christian Horner is the reason my mum got interested in Red Bull because of the Spice Girls. We're having a conversation. Puts Palantir and Nvidia. I'll buy the 12th tip, mate. Can you imagine? Bam, they'd nail it. But I think they've got problems of their own at the moment, trying to realise themselves some profit on the back of not insubstantial R&D investments. Joss wouldn't approve of Christian Horner and Toto, mate. I think Christian Horner therefore would act as a loss leader into the team potentially. Toto won in 2020. It's not his fault that Max made a mug of Lewis in WDC. Toto did win the constructors, that's true, but he always said, didn't he, when he'd have conversations with Lewis, that he owes him the promise that he'd made to Lewis, that he'd build him a championship winning car, that they had scores to settle at the altar of Michael Massey in 2021. And then Lewis decided that it was better for him, that it was in his interest to move over to Fiorano and Maranello and get in the red overalls with the yellow badges and black prancing course. I thought, well, how's that worked out, Sir Lewis? Stelli's principle. Toto can come and go and take credit like Zach, but not run day to day. So go on then, Rob. Toto, nominally, and you can talk about the substantive nominal gap here if you want to, but nominally Toto is CEO, team principal, shareholder. That's exactly, ironically, that's exactly what Christian Horner wanted, and failing to get that, ultimately some say, led to his demise as far as team principal at Red Bull Racing. He didn't have the political gravitas. He was not a C-suite exec. They would need to do some things. Toto would have to sack himself because he owns that much of the company, 33%. It's material. So therefore, they've got to bring him into all of the strategic conversations that they're having. Two captains won't work on one shift. But does Christian Horner want to be a team principal again? I'm hearing that he wants to be not quite a silent partner, but much more silent than he had been at Oracle. Excuse me, Christian Horner, Red Bull Racing. Toto should have promoted Vowles as team principal and moved to CEO. Why not do both though, Rob? I don't know, but I reckon they talked about it. And when I looked at what Alcon does as part of Stellantis, I thought I had my daily surprise. Go on, Macon, expound. JV would have done Mert proud. Techie. It's very, very techie. I can't wait. Operational effectiveness of Toto and Horner would be taught in business schools. Well, 100%. Already is. TWM. As far as Toto, he's lecturing at Harvard every other bloody week at the moment, isn't he? Talking about business or whatever. But the story's chaos. Imagine you invest a couple $100 million into a business which shortly thereafterwards is worth $6 billion. You can't write. That's Bitcoin worthy or Nvidia worthy levels. I don't know. It's mad. He's done incredible. I'm not a big Toto, the boy who cried wolf fan. I feel like he could have done more operationally in 2021, that he could have turned around his cap and got in the face of Michael Massey with a view to weaponize, no, leverage some form of influence, because in there, it's in the corners sometimes, and the operational cracks, the sledging and the brinksmanship where there is lap time. And I feel like Christian Horner and Jonathan Wheatley got that mandate acutely in 2021. Both of them understood the assignment that Michael Massey, as far as his leadership and how robust and effective he was in his governance, they understood that he was get at Upple. And that ultimately led to whatever Michael Massey did, whatever he decided or thought was a good idea to do in that final stanza in Abu Dhabi. And I just hope, I felt like even, no, Michael, no. Even that was a subservient. I don't think you would have heard Christian Horner talking that way with Michael Massey then. Their relationship wasn't, it felt and smelled different. But I digress. What do I know? Just judging from afar. Just surprised about what you're talking about, Toto selling. Yeah, I think, I mean, Baxi said that he's on his way out, and this is just a precursor potentially. But I mean, sometimes you've got to realise some capital appreciation, no, Macon. Or Horner has the legs he made, two World Driver Championship from young drivers. Did he do that though, free climb, or was that Dr. Helmut Marko's doing? Let the new generation of sim racers roll in. He's got some easy contacts. It's going to get techier than techie things. Is he selling all or part control? Giovanni, if you just come in, he's selling part, not selling all of his 33%. And by the way, for context, Toto owns, as at the time of writing, 33% of Mercedes AMG F1. Ineos 33%. Sir Jim Radcliffe owns... Mercedes owns 33%, and Sir Jim Radcliffe, his company Ineos, also owns 33%. So Sir Jim Radcliffe, Ineos 33%, Mercedes, Olia Kalunius, etc. 33%, and Toto owns the remaining 33%. No, that's chaos free climb, and that's a lot of money, mate. If you want to they should make a film. The next F1 movie should be about Toto Wolff's business exploits, for whatever you want to say about him and whatever balls he dropped in 2021. The way that he treated Sir Lewis or didn't treat Sir Lewis, whatever you want to say about him. If you view him through the lens of business success, it would be disingenuous to argue that Toto, the boy who cried wolf, is not a genius. It would be disingenuous of me at this point to say any different. As a racing man, is he a racing man's racer? Well, that's a different question. I suppose we'll see in the next couple of years, especially if Mercedes in 2026 can rewind back the clock and bring in reminiscences of 2014 split turbo hybrid settings, where shortly thereafter they won 8 constructors back to back is going to get techier than techie things. Same time tomorrow, chat. Have a fantastic evening. Between now and next time, the prosecution rests no further questions.